Pictures right now of major wildfires in Southern California continuing to burn out of control as there is a dangerous new flare-up that is forcing even more evacuations near seaside communities. Will Carr on the ground where hundreds of firefighters are trying to beat back the flames. Hi, Will.
Hey there, Leland. The fire is racing along this ridge right now, threatening 15,000 homes and businesses after picking up steam overnight. We'll have all the details in a live report ahead on America's News Headquarters.
$10 a.m. Pacific time, and so many people are waking up to such horrible news in California. 1 o'clock Eastern here. Expect the president back in Washington this evening. Welcome to America's News Headquarters. I'm Leland Vittert.
And I'm Jillian Turner. President Trump wants Republicans in Congress to move quickly for a deal on tax reform. On Twitter this morning, the president touted progress that's being made on Capitol Hill, saying things are shaping up better than projected. Phil Keating is live from West Palm Beach with more for us. Good afternoon, Phil.
Good afternoon to you. 61 degrees, gorgeous blue skies, perfect day in West Palm Beach for golfing. And that's exactly what President Trump is doing just down the road at his Trump International Golf Club. And the White House says his golf partner today is Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. And according to the White House, the two men are not only golfing, but also discussing the upcoming tax cut and reform legislation, as well as fully funding all of the president's priorities. Then after the game, the president will head back to Mar-a-Lago for just a few more hours before heading back towards Washington. Per the usual morning here at the Winter White House, President Trump going to Twitter and tweeting out a couple of items. One thing he tweeted out was, "Things are going really well for our economy," a subject that fake news spends as little time as possible discussing. Stock market hit another record high. Unemployment is now at a 17-year low, and companies are coming back into the USA. Really good news and much more to come. Followed by this tweet. Getting closer and closer on the tax cut bill, shaping up even better than projected. House and Senate working very hard and smart. End result will be not only important, but special. Saturday, President Trump flew to Jackson, Mississippi for the opening ceremony of the state's new Civil Rights Museum. He toured the exhibits and delivered a 10-minute speech, calling it an honor to have been there. Several civil rights activists boycotted the event, saying President Trump has only created a larger racial divide. And Friday night in Pensacola, Florida, a packed house for a Make America Great Again rally. And after about an hour trumpeting the state of the nation, the president again endorsed controversial Republican and accused sex offender Roy Moore over the Democrat Doug Jones in their upcoming Tuesday special Senate election. And that is something not all Republicans applaud.
We can't afford to have a liberal Democrat who is completely controlled by Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. We can't do it. We can't do it. His name is Jones, and he's their total puppet.
Yes, I mean, it doesn't represent me. I don't think it represents most of the Republican women, as well as my colleagues like Senator Tim Scott and others, and Cory Gardner have made clear.
Virginia Congresswoman Barbara Comstock on Fox News Sunday this morning right there. Air Force One is standing by just down the road at the West Palm Beach Airport. And later this afternoon, we expect that President Trump and his staff will motorcade from Palm Beach at the Winter White House over to the airport and then fly north, getting the president back to Washington and his official residence, the White House, this evening. Back to you.
There will be lots of snow waiting for him when he gets back to Washington. Thanks, Phil.
For sure.
We are less than 90 hours from knowing the outcome of what has become one of the most incredible and surprising Senate races in American history. Democrat Doug Jones and Republican Judge Roy Moore are focusing now on getting out their voters, especially their core constituencies. Live team coverage of just that on the ground in Alabama. Peter Doocy in Birmingham with the Jones camp. Jonathan Sari in Montgomery. We could say with Roy Moore, but he hasn't been doing many public events. So with the latest on Roy Moore, Jonathan.
Hi, Leland. Yeah, he has been keeping a very low profile. We do know from the campaign that he's planning a rally with Steve Bannon on Monday. This will be the third time that the former White House chief strategist has joined Moore out on the campaign trail, sometimes for multiple events. But in between these high-profile rallies are days where Moore holds no public events, and he's largely avoided questions from journalists, instead granting interviews to friendly commentators, while his campaign rallies his conservative base with TV ads focusing on social issues.
They call us warmongers for wanting to rebuild the military, racists for securing our borders, bigots for recognizing the sanctity of marriage, and they call us foolish for believing in God. They're afraid I'm going to take our Alabama values to Washington, and I can't wait.
Moore still faces mixed support from his own party. You have President Trump recording that robocall, which is scheduled to go out on Monday, the day before the election. But Alabama Senator Richard Shelby, appearing on CNN, says that the state of Alabama deserves better than Roy Moore because of all of the allegations surrounding him. Listen.
I think the women are believable. I have no reason not to believe them, just like the Attorney General Sessions said he had no reason or something not to believe the women. They were credible. But, you know, I wasn't there. I don't know what happened, but there's a lot of stories there. There's a lot of smoke. Got to be some fire somewhere.
So Senator Shelby says he can't support the Democrat in this race, but he likes the idea of a Republican write-in candidate. In fact, that's what he voted for, although he's not giving any names at this point, Leland.
Jonathan, Sara in Alabama ahead of the vote. Jonathan, thank you. Jillian has more.
Certainly.
Let's check in with Peter Doocy for the latest on the Doug Jones campaign. Peter?
Jillian, when we drive around the state listening to the radio in the car, there are a lot of commercials where Doug Jones, the Democratic candidate, talks about how if he wins, he'll work with Republicans, how he's pro-Second Amendment, and he owns a lot of guns. These are not things that you normally hear from a Democratic lawmaker or a Democratic candidate, but Jones insists that being called a Democrat, not really that important to him.
Do not let any label define you. I am just a spokesman for this incredible adventure that Louise and I are on.
Jones has been spending a ton of time in the Birmingham area trying to appeal to African-American voters who may not be motivated to vote at all on Tuesday. So that's why Jones has potential 2020 presidential contender, former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick here, helping him make the case that Jones is more open-minded than the competition.
When you send Doug Jones to the United States Senate, you send a voice of unity, of generational responsibility, of integrity, sorely needed in Alabama and in America.
Jones is staying busy this Sunday. Later on tonight, there's an event in Huntsville, and about 2 hours from now, there's a stop at a field office in Birmingham. The campaign clearly not too concerned about looking too cozy with the D.C. establishment because New Jersey Senator Cory Booker will be tagging along again the day after, delivering an energetic pitch on the candidate's behalf. Booker actually just tweeted this, quote, with @G. Douglas Jones visiting churches in Birmingham this morning. So grateful for the rousing greeting we are receiving at every church. The energy is so uplifting. Alabama votes on Tuesday. And Jones is really trying to highlight that he is out and about while Roy Moore, the Republican, is laying low. He even mentioned last night at a Get Out the Vote concert that it's almost like there's nobody running against him. Jillian?
That's Peter Doocy, live from Alabama. Thanks, Peter.
Bring in John Hammond-Tree, who is the managing producer for the Alabama Media Group, joins us also from in Alabama. John, start with this. Peter Doocy and I talked earlier today. Cory Booker, Deval Patrick down there campaigning for Doug Jones, echoing a lot of the fairly progressive talking points, identity politics. We heard that soundbite as well from Deval Patrick. How is that playing in Alabama with not only swing voters, but some of the Republicans that Doug Jones is going to need if he's going to win?
I think Doug Jones has done a pretty good job of trying to court Republican voters for the last few weeks. He's gone into places like Coleman, and he's gone into places like Marshall County, and he's been speaking directly to voters. I think they've gotten a chance to get to know him in a way that, despite being the front runner here, Roy Moore has not taken that time. And so the fact that he's bringing in people who are willing to stand on stage with him, I don't know really how that plays. I mean, Steve Bannon is an out-of-state guy too. I'm not sure that people are really going to be motivated by who's on the platform with these candidates at the end of the day.
There were some mailers that went out that caused an awful lot of controversy, with a black man on the mailer saying if a black man went after high school girls, anyone would try to make him senator, ? Did that cross a line for some people or make an important point?
Yeah, I think it's a little of both. I tweeted that out. I thought it was a questionable mailer. And when I tweeted it out, I heard from people that said this really offended me, but I also heard from people that said, he's not wrong. Alabama is a state that's almost 30% African American, and we've never elected a statewide black candidate. And so I think there is a sense that he is trying to make that pitch by showing that he's a candidate that's willing to speak across the lines. But in terms of, identity politics is about identity. I mean, Roy Moore has been running on a platform of I'm the Republican, and that's all that really matters. And so I think that's what they're both trying to do. The
Washington Post calls this a referendum on Alabama's identity. Fair?
I think that's fair. I think, Alabamians are sick of being told these are what our values are by our politicians or by outside voices. I think people want to say, we're electing you. You're supposed to be our voice. You're not supposed to tell us what we think or what we believe. And so I think the fact that one candidate is out there actually talking to people and adjusting his message. I mean, he came out and apologized for that mailer afterwards.
So, but how much of Roy Moore's support? And his support is significant in the polls, and there's a lot of reason to think that perhaps there is a little bit more support out there privately than what we see in the polls, a la the 2016 elections. So how much of Roy Moore's support is because people support Roy Moore, and how much is thumbing their nose at D.C. and the liberal media saying, you're not going to tell us in Alabama who we're going to vote for?
There's definitely people who are going to vote for him because of the party. I mean, in terms of his core supporters, he got about 200,000 votes short of Mitt Romney's total in 2012. He's always underperformed, even in his home county of Etowah County, compared to the top of the ticket. And so the idea that he has the same type of hiding support that Donald Trump had last year, I think, misunderstands the Alabama electorate. I think that there are more people, particularly in the Birmingham suburbs, who may hold their nose and vote for a Democrat for the first time, if not their lives, certainly since Siegelman was on the ballot.
No, fascinating. Very quickly, the president's recording this robocall. Noteworthy that he's not campaigning with Moore, but certainly endorsed him. Now the robocall. Will that make a difference with Alabama voters, or is the president seen as an outsider as well?
Donald Trump is very popular down here. It didn't make a difference for Luther Strange. And, in contrast, Donald Trump took the stage with Luther Strange in Huntsville and, embraced him greatly, as opposed to going to Pensacola and keeping his distance. But, you can't discount the president's endorsement of a candidate. It certainly carries some weight. Well, we'll see how that contrasts with Senator Richard Shelby's non-endorsement.
Well, and noteworthy that when the president embraced Luther Strange, he said, if Luther wins, I'm going to support the other guy, and has kept true to his word on that. John, appreciate you being with us. You got a busy week coming up. We'll look forward to talking to you in the coming days.
Thank you.
All the best.
Now to a Fox News alert. On the wildfires in Southern California, you're looking at live pictures of the flames raging across Ventura County. A major new flare-up that was fueled by unpredictable winds and increasingly dry conditions is forcing new evacuations. Our own Will Carr is on the ground live. Will, what's the latest on this?
Well, Jillian, this fire really picked up steam overnight. It's now threatening 15,000 homes and businesses as it's come across this ridgeline. You can see flames shooting up into the air. They're eating through this bone-dry brush, and I want to show you just how close they are to homes on this ridgeline. If you pan down, you can see this massive white home right here. We've seen for the past couple of hours the firefighters doing structure protection, doing everything they can. Now, because there's so much smoke on this ridgeline right next to the community that we're in that has thousands of homes and businesses. It's difficult for the fire crews to get their helicopters up in the air and do those water drops, which can be critical if the winds pick up later today. The good news is that the winds have stayed relatively calm while this fire has crept over this ridgeline. But we are in a red flag warning, which means that throughout the course of the day, we could have wind gusts up to 50, 60, 70 miles per hour. That warning will last until tonight. So these are really critical hours for the fire crews on the ground. And if the wind picks up and pushes one of the inbursts down into this community, you could be talking about an entirely new battle. So again, this is some critical time for the men and women who are up on those front lines, Jillian.
Thanks for that, Will.
The violence The violence continues in Jerusalem and across Israel with the stabbing of an Israeli security guard, with more fallout from President Trump's decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem with day 5 of the violence. Plus, a new warning to Kim Jong-un in China from U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley today on Fox News Sunday. If the Hermit Kingdom refuses to abandon its nuclear weapons program, we'll tell you what she says. And Congress grappling with more of its members facing misconduct claims, and Speaker Ryan's plans to make sure there is accountability and daylight.
We want to identify what reforms are needed to change the way things work. We need to recognize that this is a pervasive problem that women face not just here in Congress, but through every industry. And this really is a watershed moment.
Day 6 now of violence in the Middle East as protests continue over President Trump's naming of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. On Fox News Sunday, U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley doubled down on the president's reasoning.
It's the right thing to do. Israel should be no different. We didn't set any parameters. We didn't say this was the final status. What we said is we're going to do like we do in every other country, and we're going to put the embassy in its capital.
And as you could tell from that video, not everybody agrees with her or the president. Connor Powell live in Jerusalem, where it is already Sunday evening. Hi, Connor.
Yeah, Leland, for nearly a week now, we've seen anger in the streets of the Middle East. And again, U.S. allies, not only in the region, but also in Europe, criticizing President Trump's to formally and unilaterally recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Protesters and demonstrators from Beirut to Jakarta marched on the U.S. Embassy early Sunday morning protesting the move. Here in Jerusalem, we didn't see any of the protests in the Palestinian cities like Bethlehem or Ramallah that we've seen the last few days, but an Israeli security guard is in critical condition after a 24-year-old Palestinian man stabbed him. In public remarks, though, Turkish President Erdogan called Israel, quote, a terror state, while France's President Emmanuel Macron, meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, urged him to show courage and push for peace with the Palestinians. Now, Leland, Vice President Pence is scheduled to arrive here in the Holy Land in the next week or so, but Palestinian leaders are already saying they won't meet with him. They say that the U.S. has crossed a red line that really undermines traditional American efforts to act as an honest broker of peace. There is a lot of not only anger among Palestinians, but real frustration among the Palestinian leadership that have tried to push for a peaceful two-state solution. It is unclear at this point where that all goes from here, Leland.
Something, as you note, the vice president is likely to address when he comes to Jerusalem next week. Connor, good to see you. Stay safe there. Appreciate it.
And call it a pre-winter wonderland. Parts of the Deep South and the Northeast both getting blasted with an early snowstorm Saturday. In Alabama, the snow shut down a major roadway and left thousands of folks without power. The snowfall totals reached well over 14 inches in some parts of the state. Philadelphia also getting an early dose of winter with a mix of snow and plunging temperatures. Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it didn't keep...
Mr. President! Mr. President!
President Trump coming out swinging against the media. We'll tell you who the president is targeting with his Twitter feed. And the White House throwing its weight behind Roy Moore with just a few days to go before Alabama voters head to the polls. Our Fair and Balanced panel on if the president's robocall will get more supporters out to the ballot box.
We want jobs, jobs, jobs. So get out and vote for Roy Moore.
Week of high-profile resignations in Congress related to sexual misconduct. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle say that more allegations against elected officials could be forthcoming. Caroline Shively joins us live with the latest on this story. Caroline, what can you tell us?
Well, Jillian, 2 Democrats and a Republican quit Congress last week because of sexual harassment scandals. Even more are under investigation by congressional committees. And today on Fox, 2 female legislators from both sides of the aisle say it's not over yet. Here's Democrat Debbie Dingell and Republican Barbara Comstock talking to Chris Wallace.
I've heard reports that as many as 30 or 40 members of the House and Senate may face allegations of sexual harassment.
I'm hearing those same rumors. The numbers grow. We tweak. I should be naming past people, and that should be fully disclosed.
Congresswoman Comstock was talking about a secret fund to settle workplace disputes in congressional offices, including sexual harassment cases, like the $220,000 payout to an accuser of Congressman Alcee Hastings and an $84,000 payment to the case of Congressman Blake Farenthold. The issue is also hitting the Senate side. On Thursday, Al Franken announced he's getting out soon after numerous women accused him of groping them. His announcement comes just a day after several Democratic senators called for his resignation. Some analysts say the Democratic Party appears to be trying to contrast itself with the Republicans' handling of allegations against Senate candidate Roy Moore, who is accused of sexually pursuing teenage girls 4 decades ago when he was in his 30s. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich says Franken getting pushed out by Democrats shows an overreaction on the left.
1 million people had elected him, and 30 people decided he was inappropriate. This is purely and simply hysteria.
The House and Senate have approved anti-harassment training for members and staffers. Now they're looking at the 22-year-old law that governs how harassment can be reported in Congress. Jillian, back to you.
Thanks, Caroline. Several of Alabama's top Republican leaders say they'll back Roy Moore in Tuesday's special Senate election, regardless of the multiple allegations of sexual misconduct levied against him. Moore also gained a coveted endorsement and last-minute robocall from President Trump this week. But if Moore does claim victory Tuesday, it's unclear what kind of welcome he'll get from the Senate here in Washington, D.C. Here to weigh in is our fair and balanced political panel. Brad Blakeman is a former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush, and Dan Cannon is a Democratic strategist and former EPA liaison for President Obama. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
Blake, I want to go to you first. Democrats are already highlighting the degree to which Roy Moore represents all that is wrong with the Republican Party. If he glides the next few days to victory, what kind of political cost do you foresee that having for the Republican Party going into 2018?
Well, he's the poster boy for bad behavior. Here we have the Democrats cleaning house. Republicans have also cleansed themselves with members who needed to go. Al Franken leaves the Senate, and we possibly get more. Look, if we win, we lose, because the Democrats will try and paint us as the party of Moore. We're certainly not. And when Moore does arrive in Washington, if that's the case, he will not be welcomed by a throng of people. What he would be welcomed with is an ethics investigation, which, of course, we all know drags on. And if I were giving advice to Moore, if he does come to Washington, is lay low and be a reliable vote for the 2 years of the unexpired term, and hopefully Republicans will get their act together for the 20 election.
Sounds like Republicans are going to choose the best from a set of not great options here if he has victory next week. So, Dan, in the final home stretch now, we see the Democrats going all in for Doug Jones. They've sent folks like Senator Cory Booker. He's hitting the ground hard in the state. I want to pull up a tweet from Senator Booker. He says, I'm in the United States Senate, and I don't want to be next to you wondering if Senate pages will be safe from your advances. Your bigotry, ignorance, and hate has no place in the Senate. I'm going to my ancestral home state of Alabama today to lend a hand in defeating you. What do you say to that?
Well, I think Brad is right. I think if Roy Moore wins, there is a problem in the Senate for Republicans, not just in the Senate, but I think for the entire Republican brand. And I would argue that I think there has been a time when the Republican Party was not the party of Roy Moore. At the moment, the RNC is supporting him. Donald Trump is tweeting for his support, doing a robocall. The leadership of the party is actively endorsing and working for this candidate. And there are options Mitch McConnell has. They can expel him with a 2/3 vote. They could deny him committee assignments. They could immediately have an ethics investigation. I doubt they'll pursue those options with any vigor because they will want that reliable vote, and they will really be loath to spark a riot from the Trump base against them,
Well,
and they don't want to face those consequences.
And the party hasn't always been all in behind Roy Moore either. We have to keep in mind, at certain points in this race, it seemed like the president was really out on a limb, sometimes completely alone in his defense of the candidate.
Well, the party is not all in on
Well, and you can argue, some folks are arguing they now are, I think, to kind of save face at the end of this race. I agree with you, Brad, that his candidacy all along has highlighted the rift.
So let's remember that when Donald Trump had the tape come out, the Access Hollywood tape, and everyone in the world thought that he was certainly going to lose, you had Republicans calling for him to pull out of the race because it was unacceptable for him to even be a candidate, much less president. But then the minute he won, flipped the script. I think that's going to happen with Roy Moore as well.
Isn't it a victory for the president in a certain sense that he's even in the race, that Moore remains in the race today?
Well, it's a blessing and a curse for the administration, because we're going to have to deal with this guy both in the Senate, his colleagues, and the White House. And it's not going to be a happy time. Moore is not going to be accepted by his colleagues, both Republicans and Democrats. The vast majority will not accept him. They'll have to live with him because the people of Alabama sent him to Washington. But his tenure is not going to be one that is going to be of non-controversy. There's going to be controversy with Roy Moore as long as he serves. That's a given.
There has been controversy up till now, and it is poised to continue. Gentlemen, we've got to leave it there. Thank you so much. Brad Blakeman, Dan Kahneman, see you soon. Still to come, growing concerns about the upcoming Winter Olympics as Kim Jong-un and his regime press ahead with their nuclear weapons program. Plus, we'll take a look at what's fueling President Trump's latest comments about the media.
So tonight we're going to speak straight to the American people and cut right through the fake news media. Right through.
Just into the Fox newsroom in the past couple of minutes, President Trump's recorded robocall in support of Republican Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore. In the recording released by the Moore campaign, the president warns a Doug Jones win in the Senate would undermine the president's America First platform. Here is just part of that call.
Hi, this is President Donald Trump, and I need Alabama to go vote for Roy Moore. It is so important. We're already making America great again. I'm going to make America safer and stronger and better than ever before. But we need that seat. We need Roy voting for us.
That being a big part of the Alabama Senate race, the president's endorsement. Another big part of the Alabama Senate race has been the media's coverage of it. And a lot of folks in Alabama say they just don't care what the media says. The president echoing that he cares, perhaps, but he doesn't necessarily believe what the media says, attacking the media again on Twitter today for their lack of coverage on the growing economy. And this past week, the president also went after inaccurate reporting by two major news outlets in regards to his campaign. With us now, Jeff Katz, radio host on WRVA, Richmond, Virginia, and astute watchers and folks with true geographical knowledge will realize that is a background of Boston, but you do work in Richmond, Virginia, and we're glad to have you. You do. That is not fake news. We appreciate that.
It is not fake news.
Three big stumbles by the media. We won't go through them, but certainly it was not exactly a great week. The CNN media critic even saying that one of their stories left a black eye for CNN. Does this bring fake news sort of from fringe conspiracy and tweets now into something that the mainstream media needs to deal with?
Well, you know, to hear CNN talk about how they've gotten a black eye over this, I think they went far past 2 black eyes a long time ago. Yeah, I think it's a thoroughly legitimate thing. And as somebody who's been inside of newsrooms and broadcasting outlets for 20 plus years, there's definitely a bias which has been inherent as long as I've been around against people who are conservative in general, Republican in particular. But the animus and the vicious nature of so-called coverage of this president, I think, is absolutely, positively inexcusable. And I think what is angering so many people in certain news outlets is that this president from the very beginning said, listen, I'm going to talk to the American people. My obligation is to the American people. I've been to plenty of cocktail parties. I've dealt with lots of great people.
Jeff, let me ask you a question, though. When somebody picks a fight with somebody else, should they be surprised that there is animus? I mean, President Trump uses the media as his punching bag, as his foil. Why should he be surprised if they come back punching at him?
Well, I don't think there's a problem if they're punching back, but you know that the obligation of a real reporter, a serious journalist, is to record and report. And now we just have this machine operating in certain news outlets that, frankly, they identify themselves as part of the so-called resistance. They're the opposition, and they're getting tagged over and over and over again, pimping this fake news. And I think it's inexcusable.
You talk about this, and at least for one reporter, it turned out to be inexcusable because he doesn't have a job anymore, and that's from the Washington Post. He put up this tweet with a pretty sarcastic comment about where the president was giving a speech. He said, packed to the rafters, in a picture that was taken long before the speech began. And then the president demanded an apology. He apologized, and now he since has left. This is the president's tweet. The Washington Post just admitted that his picture was a fake fraud, showing an almost empty arena last night for my speech in Pensacola, when in fact he knew the arena was packed as shown on TV. Fake news. He should be fired. What happens, though, when the shoe's on the other foot? When all of a sudden it's a reporter who files something that is positive to the president and it turns out to be wrong? Should they be fired too?
Well, I'm waiting for anybody in those outlets to do anything positive regarding President Trump. And once they do, I will be more than happy to weigh in on it as to whether it's fake or real. I think those of you who are in the journalistic community, not the opinion portion of it, but as real reporters and serious journalists, you have an obligation to record and report. And that means you can't be pushing this fake news. I get it. There are a lot of people inside those certain news outlets that hate this president. They hate everything that he believes. They hate everybody who supports him. But if you really do
Jeff,
want to report on this, you have to be honest.
I want to get something that there hasn't been a lot of reporting on. And the president's talked about this. He says there's not enough reporting on the stock market, on low unemployment, on jobs coming back. And what I'm interested in is when callers call into your show, do they say, hey, look, I feel a lot better about the economy. I've got more job opportunities. The economy is doing better for me. Are reporters missing that story, or is it a story that the rest of America doesn't really care about or hasn't felt yet?
No, I think that it is a very real story, and we've talked about that extensively. We've looked at 401ks on a personal basis and with callers, how much your 401k has grown in the last year, taking a look at the stock market, people feeling much more confident. I don't know that it's the president's place to tell reporters, hey, this is a story you ought to be covering. But as somebody who lives in the real world, it seems odd to me that there are some wonderful advancements in terms of the economy and promises that the president kept that just seem to not be on the radar of most of these reporters.
Well, I'm sure it'll get coverage. Very real news on WRVA, Richmond, Virginia, online as well. Jeff, appreciate always you coming on and sharing your thoughts.
Always my pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Great to see you. Jillian?
Coming up, the threat that Kim Jong-un poses to the upcoming Winter Olympics and what that means for Team USA.